It was an absolutely wild free agency fantasy period, especially at running back. We have so many old faces in new places, and after the spending spree, so many teams made splashes, but I think my number one value on this top 5 fantasy values post free agency is going to surprise you. Running backs matter again, just accept it. But all it took was a 25% increase in the salary cap in 4 years for us to get here. Josh Jacobs, Saquon, Barkley, go get paid. And they got paid. At number 5, my top 5 list, starting at 5, Saquon Barkley gets the big long-term extension, and he gets the bell cow role. The Eagles are done with their running back stable. They're going in a new direction. They're going with Barkley as their bell cow. So how is he only number 5 on my list? Well, this is a values list, and Barkley right now, his ADP has gone from around 20 to 15, 16 overall. I think that's fair. I think it's fair. But in a season where there is so much value at running back in rounds 7 through 12, I think it's going to become a lot harder to kind of click the running backs in these rounds 2 and 3 pocket that we have a little bit of questions on, especially because you can build out running back stables that are so great. But let's talk about Barkley in Philly, right? I think the answer is obvious, right? The Eagles saw a little bit of what the 49ers have done with Christian McCaffrey, and they want to copy some of that success. However, Barkley and McCaffrey are not the same player. McCaffrey is the type of guy who's going to be able to take 22, 25 carries every single week and still perform. Saquon, this is no slight towards him, but he's not that style of player. He's more of a, kind of in space finesse player, and big plays are his name of the game. And I think the Eagles view Barkley as a big play shot player who can, generate creative plays behind their offensive line. That is awesome. The Eagles still have a, even without Jason Kelce, they still have a top 5 offensive line. Last year, he tied with Breece Hall in explosive runs of 15 or more yards. That was 11th best. And the season before that, Saquon Barkley was great. The Giants' offensive line did not give him a ton of lanes to run through, but he was top 10 in explosive runs in 2022 as well. The big concern for me for fantasy beyond Barkley probably not being a 22, 23, 24 carry type player is Jalen Hurts is just too good at pushing into the end zone. The Eagles are too good at pushing Hurts' butt. Over the last 2 seasons, Hurts has scored 25 touchdowns on 33 carries inside the 5. Eagles running backs have only scored 17 on 42 carries. It's just like, it's basically an ATM. You're just walking into the end zone every single time with this push. And the running backs, while they've had success behind this line, Barkley is probably going to be capped in that department. And for that reason, I'm probably going to be a little bit lower on him in the second round. My number 4 value is Josh Jacobs. Obviously, if you're drafting Jacobs, you're buying Jacobs this season. You're actually now buying low again, kind of weirdly, if you've been into following Josh Jacobs' career for the last couple of years. In 2022, he had the breakout huge season, finished as a top 5 fantasy running back. Then the wheels fell off a little bit last year. But let's take a step back. In his career, Jacobs has finished as the RB 18 or better by fantasy points per game in 5 straight seasons. Again, he's done that with a myriad of different quarterbacks, myriad of different coaches. And then, like I said, last season, it really was pretty bad. And as a Jacobs truther myself, I can even say this. Last year, Jacobs was one of the most inefficient running backs in the game. He scored 4.4 fewer fantasy points than he should have based on expected fantasy points. And that's based on his role, like, how many snaps he gets, how many times he gets targeted, how many times he gets the ball near the goal line. Only Austin Eckler and Tony Pollard were less efficient by XFP last season. That's the bad news. The good news is Jordan Love is an emerging star. Like we saw it in the playoffs, we saw it in the back half of last season. If Jordan Love can continue to ascend, the sky's the limit for this Packers team. Secondly, the Packers' offensive line is a nice upgrade for the Raiders. The Raiders were kind of mediocre-ish in adjusted yards before contact, even in 2022, and they were really poor last season. So, maybe we can, have that as something to point to for Jacobs. The big question I have is what type of role he's going to have in the passing game, but we know the goal line role should be pretty good. Flukishly, Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon only scored 4 touchdowns on 29 carries inside the 10 last season. Jacobs has been pretty good inside the 10 and near the goal line in his career. And while A.J. Dillon's back, I fully expect Josh Jacobs to get the goal line role. So Jacobs, ADP in like the mid 30s right now. I'm going to come in a little higher than market than him. I want to draft receivers early, and I'm into Josh Jacobs kind of in that late round 3, early 4th round pocket. I thought his ADP would come up a little bit more. I think there's still some growth in that department, and I think by the end of summer, Jacobs will probably be around 25, 26 overall in drafts. Going into the top 3, Joe Mixon is my 3rd favorite value in drafts right now. He's going off the board around 65 overall. I am ahead of market on Mixon in Houston. The Bengals were going to cut him. They're going to cut Mixon. They're going to replace him with Zach Moss until the Texans swooped in and they're like, no. We want our guy. We want Joe Mixon. They flipped the Bengals a late round pick. Then they extended Mixon's contract, which is interesting. It's very interesting. For 2 reasons. One, Mixon had just 1 year, $6 million left on his deal. So basically, Houston could have just had an out after this year. But instead, they basically gave Mixon an extra year on his deal, gave him some more comfort. And to me, most importantly, this just means that Mixon is rolling into the season as their starter. Now, analytically, there are some red flags for Mixon here. According to FantasyPoints data, Mixon's yards after contact per carry has fallen in 3 straight years. Last season, he was just 31st out of 41 qualified running backs. I guess if you want to point to a silver lining, Devin Singletary was 35th, so it's a little bit of an upgrade for Houston here. If he can bounce back a little bit to where Mixon was in 2020 and 2021, then maybe we can say, okay, he's average at best running back at this point. But if he bounces back just a little bit and he gets the role that he had in Cincinnati, or even the role that Devin Singletary just had last year, then he's a really, really strong value in drafts right now. Singletary closed out the final 12 games last year, just for comparison's sake. That was after he kind of usurped Dameon Pierce and became a starter. Singletary last 12 games was the RB10 by snaps, the RB7 in routes. So basically his involvement on passing downs. He was the RB7 by route share. And that amounted to 14.1 half PPR expected points per game. That's a solid RB2. Mixon getting goal line work on a great offense attached to CJ Stroud. You can get him in the 60s. I thought Mixon, again, would kind of creep into maybe even the high 40s. His age, obviously changing teams is a concern. But I think in Houston, with just Dameon Pierce as his only competition behind him right now, Mixon looks like a fantastic RB2 value for receiver-heavy drafters such as myself. Top 2 now. Top 2. This move was basically like a Madden franchise player's dream. Like every single time you get the Ravens, you probably want to add to their running back room. No offense to Gus Edwards or Keaton Mitchell or J.K. Dobbins, but you want a good running back there with Lamar Jackson. I don't know if you could really put a better tandem together than Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. This is just a freak show in the backfield between Lamar's speed, Henry's still got speed in my opinion, and just obviously he's an incredible back to bring down. And the numbers last year, if you had Derrick Henry in fantasy, obviously you were not too pleased, especially by the end of the last season. Will Levis comes in and you might think, hey, the Titans are going to have a little bit better of a quarterback play. Henry was still just basically a very game script dependent RB2. The numbers behind the scenes, though, are very good. Still very good for Henry. He was top 10 in yards after contact per carry again, 3rd straight season, and top 10 by yards after contact per carry, and he was 6th in explosive runs or 15 or more yards. Bet you guys did not expect that. I don't think Henry's washed. I think he's lost a step. He's 30 years old, but he's not washed. The Titans had an absolutely abysmal offensive line. They were 2nd from last in adjusted yards before contact per attempt last year. That takes out all quarterback scrambles and kneel downs. Henry had a really, really bad offensive line last season, and in this system, he has so much touchdown upside. Gus Edwards fell over for 13 rushing touchdowns inside the 10 last year. He had 30 carries inside the 10. Only Jalen Hurts had more touchdowns inside the 10 last year than Edwards. Henry, man, he's always been a great goal line back, always been just brute force to slow down, and now he's got the ultimate 1-2 tandem. Lamar, kind of stealing defenders' eyes, is on the edge. You got Henry coming downhill if you want to run zone read. This is going to be an unbelievable backfield to watch. I love him in round 4. After a wide receiver heavy start, especially on underdog where it's half PPR, and I'm more so chasing touchdowns. I think Henry has the ability to score 12, 13 this season. He has the upside for more. All right, my number one value, again, I said at the top, it might surprise you. It's Zach Moss. Zach Moss is my number one value right now. I am shocked by his ADP. 114 overall, RB 35 in updated underdog ADP. I have him RB 23 in my new rankings coming out here. The Bengals straight up viewed him as an upgrade over Joe Mixon, and I agree. I think he's an upgrade. Last season, Moss was top 15 in both yards after contact and missed tackles forced per carry. Mixon was outside of the top 20. We noted earlier Mixon's kind of red flags analytically. Zach Moss, he's not the best running back in the game. He's never going to be a top 10 running back in any of those metrics, but he was very, very solid last season, and he is a great fit in this system with the Bengals. Obviously, Joe Burrow is very, very shotgun heavy. Moss just came from a shotgun-heavy offense in Indianapolis. The big question here, and this will be a training camp battle to watch, is him and Chase Brown. Brown gave them some big plays late in the season and kind of like a change of pace, passing down mainly role with Joe Mixon last season, and I think Brown is due for a big jump in snaps. Just how big it'll be will be the question, and it'll kind of come down to Chase Brown because, like I said, he was explosive in the open field. I mean, there was plenty of times where, he would get a gap and he was, dusting guys out in the open field, but he's going to have to improve in pass protection. I think a part of the reason they brought in Moss is because Moss is a better pass protector than Chase Brown. Both of these guys, from a fantasy perspective, like going into this year, they obviously have contingent value, and contingent value is just what happens when the starter gets hurt, right? If Zach Moss were to miss a few games, we would be boosting Chase Brown up our waiver sheets. We'd be boosting him up in our projections. But we do know what's happened when Zach Moss gets a bell cow role and he gets a starting role. Now, late in the season, it wasn't great, but Moss started 6 games last year and averaged 15.6 half-point PPR points per game. That would have made him the RB5, again, points per game. And he handled at least 75% of the snaps in each of those 6 starts. So Moss has done it. He's produced in that role. So if Chase Brown were to miss time, Moss has contingent upside as an already pretty solid like RB2, RB3. He could be an RB1 if Brown were to miss time. Guys, thanks so much for watching. I will see you in the underdog streets. If you could, leave a like, leave a comment. If you disagree with any of my rankings, please drop a comment below. Happy to get back to you, and subscribe to the channel. It really does mean a lot. I'll see you next time.